This thing rolling. Hello, welcome. Thank you so much for being here. I'm just going to repeat what I said a second ago, which is this is set up like a regular Zoom and not a webinar. So if you could do us a favor and mute yourself. There actually will be time to ask questions at the end, but during the presentation, if you could keep yourself muted, that way if your dog barks or your cat meows, you won't become the center of attention. So thank you so much for being here at this panel, which is called Spark, about igniting creativity. It's sponsored by the Good Hart Artist Residency and supported in part by the Michigan Arts and Culture Council and the National Endowment for the Arts. We'd also like to thank our volunteers and our donors because they are the people that help us stay running. So just a couple housekeeping and reminders kind of things. Mute your mics. This session is being recorded. And closed captioning is available if that's interesting to you. The way that you do that, it's turned on, but you have to turn it on your own screen. If you scroll to the bottom of your screen, you'll probably see something that says more with 3 dots on top. And if you were to click on that, it says something about captions. And if you click on that, then poof, closed captioning appears on your screen, hopefully, if the tech works. So I'd just like to give you like a little quick overview of the next hour that we're going to spend together. So I'd like to begin, like any fun panel does, by inciting some anxiety. Create something brilliant. Make it something that the world has never seen before. Make it better than anything you have ever produced in all your life. Go. If you feel like a panic or a sinking feeling when I say that, you know why this panel was born. This panel is all about that moment of anxiety and panic. You want to create something, but where do you start? How do you start? How do you keep it going? So we thought we would ask some artists how you do that. Some writers and some artists, actually. They'll give you some ideas. And that is what we are exploring for this night. Just to let you know, this is a 2-part series on creativity. The next one is on March 12th. That one is about, it's called Art in the Time of Chaos. And that is all about how calamity influences creativity. So if you're interested in that, that's coming. We'll plug that when we get a little bit closer to that. But tonight, let me tell you who's here. I'm Carrie Thibault. I'm the Associate Director of the Good Hart Artist Residency. There are 2 people who are off screen, Sue and Bill Kelso, who are the founders of the Good Hart Artist Residency. They're monitoring the chat. So if you have questions you want to post there, go ahead and do that, and they will keep an eye on that. But the people that we are most excited about who are here tonight are some artists who have stayed at the Good Hart Artist Residency in the past. They are Lynn Bennett-Carpenter, who was here in August 2022, Karolina Letunova, who was here in October of 2023, and Jan Shoemaker, who was here in September 2020. Also, she has a new book that just came out, which is really exciting. So we're going to hear each panelist give kind of a take on creating Spark, and then we'll switch to some roundtable questions, and we'll wind up with some questions from the audience. So in lieu of giving a big, long introduction for each of these artists, what I'd like to do is move through them super quickly and have them answer just a couple simple questions. At the same time, I'm going to have Bill pop a link to their websites in the chat. So if you want to look up more about them, that information will be there. But panelists, here's my very first question to you. What do you make and why do you make it? And we'll start with Lynn.
Oh, wow. Well, I'm going to answer that in my PowerPoint. But basically, my main body of work right now is a series called Handwoven Drawings. So you'll see part of that process. I also do installation work, and I'm located in Metro Detroit. So welcome to my studio in Pontiac, Michigan.
Thank you. Karolina, what do you do?
I write novels. Well, I'm working on my first novel. I also write very short stories, very short prose. And why do I do it? I suppose I do it to sort of both preserve the world that I grew up in, which was in Western Siberia through the 80s and the 90s, and at the same time to also confront things that struck me as sort of unjust, especially in the female experience of those decades.
And Jan, what do you do and why do you do it?
I write nonfiction. I am an essayist and poet. And I suppose I do it because I live inside language. And there is no way to navigate the world without writing about it.
Thank you. So now you know who we're dealing with, and let's dive a little bit deeper into their craft. And we're going to start with Lynn Bennett-Carpenter.
All right, here we go. So what is my creative spark is sort of how I frame this. And there's so many things that ignite, I think, creativity. So I'm just going to concentrate on one thing that I think is probably the most important thing to me as far as getting started, getting the idea. So what is LBC's creative spark is basically, what is the question? Questions are the most important driver of my work. So I sort of, quest is in the word question. And for me, that really rings true because it is a quest. So for me, a good question has mystery, it has risk, it has excitement, there's practicality, and also intrigue. So it keeps me engaged with my work, the question itself. And I also think it energizes and challenges the work. So the attempts to answer the question is in the work itself. It's almost a documentation of the quest and me trying to answer the question. So I'm an artist, so the answers to these are visual. So I'm going to walk through some of the questions that I've asked myself in my work and how I've attempted to answer them. So way back when I was getting my BFA in drawing and painting, I became really interested in installation work because of this question: how do I create a holistic and playful art experience that involves all the senses? This was driven by the philosopher Hans Georg Gadamer, who philosophizes sort of about the phenomenology of play, serious play, games. And so this was something that I really wanted to bring into my work. So I answered that through this is a large scale installation. And this is what brought me to grad school, actually, was the installation work. And I got an MFA in fiber from the Cranbrook Academy of Art. And here's the first installation I did there. It was in my studio, 10 feet by 10 feet space, and I suspended 400 hankies in this space. So when you went into the space, you were completely enveloped. So this work was touching you, your sight was sort of obliterated because you're just immersed in all these hankies. So this was my attempt to sort of create these playful, holistic experiences way back when. As I was leaving Cranbrook, I began working with the material of elastic. Elastic is perfect for playfulness in terms of these large scale installations, because they could be both optical and also played with and manipulated and changed. So this work, you could split it apart and walk through it. You could grab it and snap it. Took up quite, you could push it to an extreme, but then it would return to itself. So it allowed for it to exist as an object, but an object with the surprise of being able to play and touch it. So I've made quite a few of these. And then I went on, also while I was in grad school, to sort of go hone in just solely on the sense of touch. So how do I create a work of art that is for the sense of touch and is meant to be a beautiful and dynamic experience, but is mainly just for the sense of touch? So this brought me to create these wearable pieces that were on the body. They manipulated how you could move because you sort of had to deal with it. And so you're sort of moving and having the physicality within the physicality in the work itself, which was really exciting to me. So things that are playful. When I was a resident at Good Hart, we actually did a workshop with these, which was really fun. So big red. So I graduated from the Art Academy. I was the mother of young children. I was immediately employed as an artist in residence at Cranbrook in the high school. I was a daughter, I was a spouse, and I had very little time. My job was very demanding. My life was very demanding. So to keep creating these large scale elastic installations was just not happening. I just couldn't do it. The logistics, were sort of beyond just a studio. This is where I taught. So all of a sudden I was in the charge of 60 floor looms. I taught weaving at Cranbrook, a beautiful space. So my installation work came quickly to a halt. So the driving question was, how do I keep making art within these limitations? And that became a creative driver as well. And I just retired from, side note, I just retired from teaching here. So this was my last class. But back to how do I make art? Well, under a very demanding schedule, I returned to drawing. Like I said, my BFA is drawing and painting. And the beautiful thing and the true gift in returning to drawing as a practical means was that the drawings waited for me. I had a table set up in the dining room of our house. And so, if I was doing laundry, I could go up and draw for 10 minutes. And I always felt like the drawings just were waiting for me for the moment that I had. So this answered just a lot of practical considerations for me. And sometimes I think that is a driving force of creativity. So these are some of the drawings I did. And then the question became, how do I merge drawing and weaving? And I had a sabbatical year where I could really delve deep into this question. And this is when I developed the handwoven drawings. This was in 2015 and has become just such an incredible body of work for me, very dynamic. So basically what I do is I draw and paint on thin wood, and then I cut it apart with a X-Acto knife, and then I weave it back together on the floor loom. So here's a little video of my process, which I think sort of shows it. So here I am cutting. The cut itself is almost like a drawn line. You can see it undulates as I cut it. I think of it almost mimicking thread, and then it gets woven back together, reintegrated, which I think can also be sort of a metaphor for my work as well. Just the taking it apart, the destroying it almost, and then reintegrating it. So let's see. So this is the piece that the stills I showed you, how it turns out. So this is 8 feet by 3 feet. So they can become quite large. So now that I'm drawing, one exciting question that I ask is what drawing mediums will hold up in this process? So this has become like such an exciting world for me to explore, like what can withstand this process. So this has driven years of intrigue for me. So the basics are acrylic and ink. I've used colored pencil. I've used silver point, or I've actually drawn with silverware. Metal leaf, and my most recent works, which I'll show you in a minute, have gold leaf in them. I can also collage and draw and paint on top of them afterwards. So here's a piece cut up with the metal leaf adhered to it. And then it was woven back together. And here's the finished pieces. So, you know, when I start off, I don't know if this is going to work or not, but usually it does. These pieces are ones I'm finishing up now for a show here in Detroit. This is 24 karat gold leaf. And then the collage elements are super fun. This is a piece called Swansea Beach Park, and you can see the Chinook helicopters. This is a tribute to my son who's in the Army. But these little cutouts are actually adhered with magnets through the woven structure. So they're also made of wood. So then one question became, could it be sculptural? And it can become sculptural and architectural and maybe even installation. So these are sort of the questions I'm currently asking of the work. Can it be wearable? So some of the questions I was asking of my installation work are now starting to merge into the hand-woven drawings. So this is where I'm at. This is my quest and curiosity. So maybe after the artists present, we can think about what questions do you ask of your work? What questions drive you? Or what questions could you ask? Or do you need to ask? So thank you.
That was so good. Thank you so much, Lynn.
Yep.
So the next person we're going to hear from is Karolina.
That was incredible, Jen. It's always fascinating to hear about another artist's process, especially in a different media. All right, so as I mentioned, I'm a writer, and I want to touch today on both inspiration for new work and for sort of coming back with reinvigorated creativity to ongoing work and longer, potentially multi-year projects. So for me, I've noticed that inspiration often arises out of stillness. And what I mean by stillness, it's almost a certain quality of like a relaxed, quiet mind, the kind of mind that I tend to get when I'm driving or maybe walking or showering. I have to be alone in the car for that without my kids, you know, and I wouldn't be listening to any content if I'm walking. But I was actually, so I also work as a freelance editor. So I made myself lunch today. I work from home and I was thinking about this panel and I realized that, oh, I better do what I preach. Like if I'm after this relaxed quality of the mind, like I better just eat and not like watch an educational video as I might do otherwise. So, you know, I changed my process today, thanks to all of you already. So if you asked me a year ago, I might have had trouble identifying that that's what actually helps, that sort of relaxed, open, unoccupied mind. But I read this year that there's actually brain research that shows that brain at rest in this sort of quiet state can make connections that it can't otherwise. So it sort of requires a certain quality of being downshifted, right, so to say, to go ahead and make those connections. So what I wanted to invite, so that's how it works for me, but what I wanted to invite all of you to do is take a moment with your pen and paper and think a minute or two and try to remember the last time that you got sort of a spark, a creative spark. Where were you? You know, what were the conditions? What were you doing? If you can remember anything about your mental and emotional state, jot that down too. And as you do it, if there's anything you want to pop in the chat to share with the group, you're more than welcome to. One thing I've noticed too is that for me, for some reason, driving works better than walking, and walking works better than showering. A lot of people get their good ideas in the shower. It's always for me while I'm driving. It's so terribly unsafe, but that's what happens. Um, so what I'd like us to do then is to think of opportunities in our, I assume we're all here to sort of trying to invite more spark and creativity in our lives. Where are the pockets in your day where you might do it? Especially now, I feel like it's so much harder, right? We have social media on our phones, content is always coming in. There's so much of it. I think of I noticed the midday meals today. That's definitely one for me. Perhaps you walk or drive where you can do it. Oh yes, perfect. Mo got inspired today walking in the first snow in New York City. That sounds beautiful. Unwinding or reviewing the day right before bedtime. Oh, that is a very good one. I struggle with that one. That is a hard one. I would have to like put all the reading away. Um, so there's actually excellent habit research too that shows that if you want to start a new habit, one of the most easy and sustainable ways of doing it is to sort of attach it to another thing that you already do. So I sit a lot. So I tried to do a little bit of daily yoga to keep my back pain under control. But I'm also lazy. Like I would much rather not start. I know I will feel great after I do it, but starting is very hard. So what I try to do is I try to do the yoga before I have breakfast. So either, the time is right, or I start feeling hungry and, roll out the mat, the hardest part. But I've noticed if for whatever reason I miss that chance, I will often forget and not realize until I'm already in bed and it's too late. So that's my second super quick prompt for you is if you look for an opportunity to sort of have that quiet, relaxed mind quality, where are those little pockets in your day or in your week where you could sort of remember to do that? What else it made me realize is that I don't daydream anymore. Like, I feel like when I was a teenager, right, it seems like all you would do is sit in the classroom and daydream. And I don't know that I daydream anymore, but it's sort of what I'm trying to describe is similar to that. Um, so I'll give you another example today when I forced myself to just eat my lunch. At first I was like, oh, nothing's gonna happen, like I'm trying to force it. And then I found myself thinking about this novel that I just read and sort of had a realization about it relative to the novel I'm working on. Um, and that sort of reframed how I saw the novel that I finished last night. Um, so it's amazing. Like even if you sort of force it a little bit in a couple of minutes, the brain uses the opportunity anyway and arrives somewhere. Yes, selected shorts are so wonderful. Thank you for sharing that, Michelle. I think actually your comment made me think of the novel that I just read that often, consuming high quality content, right, leads to sort of these further connections with our own work. So I'm sure that many of you are also working on potentially could be writers and are working on longer projects. So I've been working on a novel for about 4 years. And for me, it's often a matter of, sometimes it's hard to get started on a given day, right? I look at the whole thing and it's a little bit overwhelming. It's a little bit scary. Like I'm not sure exactly like where to go in and do something. And I found that if I just sort of trick myself, if I go, okay, just look at the chapter for 10 minutes, just 10 minutes, I will find myself 40 minutes later, deep in the content. So for me, it's for existing content, and especially for existing work and larger projects, um, just kind of visiting it, just kind of being friendly with it. Like if you're hanging out with a friend, right? Like I'm just gonna stop by, no pressure. We're gonna have a little chat. That tends to be the more productive approach for that one. So I'm just gonna check my time, and I believe I'm at 8 minutes. So I'm gonna pass the torch.
Thank you so much. I think that is a really good point. It's just asking, but when are you creative and like allowing space for that to come in? And we have one more to listen to. Jan, tell us how we can be more creative, how we can find that spark.
So I have a couple of ideas. Um, One of the things that I do, and probably you all do it as well, as I go through the day, I keep track of ideas that come to me. It can be a quote, it can be an encounter, and I have to write them down or I lose them. They're gone forever. I keep them in my phone. We always have our phones on us. So I scrolled through my phone a couple of days ago in the notes, and what I have right now is a quote from the New York Times. Armed men interrupt live TV station in Ecuador. After that, I wrote, must I monitor events in Ecuador when my head is already so full here with the clogged drain and the dog's teeth and the fucking Trump panting after the presidency again? I can do something with that down the road in a week or two or a month. But if I hadn't jotted that down, it would be gone. Another one that I scrolled to was Hawk in the Hemlock with his eye on a finch. Um, a finch was being pursued by a hawk, and they went into a hemlock in our yard. Again, that's a thing I can work with. It's an image I can work with down the line. But what I had time for at that moment was just making the note. The third one was our busybody neighborhood association is persecuting our immigrant neighbors for having too many unruly flowers. An appalling bit of information I took in that I can work with later. The New York Times, number 4 on my list, the New York Times had a short article called Everyone Should Make Their Own Butter, which was the most appalling thing I'd run into in the day. With everything we have to do, really, we're supposed to make our own butter. I can work with that down the road. I ran into the word runnels the other day. I didn't know what that meant. I thought I knew, but I certainly wouldn't have been confident enough to use it. And it's a beautiful word. It refers to the narrow channels in the ground that liquids flow through. So I just jotted down the word. That'll work its way into my poetry probably someday. Another suggestion I have for sparking is when you sit down to write, perhaps focusing on an evocative object. I have books and books full of leaves and flowers that are pressed in them. I'll open a book to one of those at 6 o'clock in the morning when it's still dark and nobody wants a piece of me because the sun hasn't come up yet. And I can study that pressed oak leaf, from kinder times. And sometimes that will spur me to write. Other physical objects that might spark any one of us, a suitcase. I actually have a document that Carrie will email to anybody interested in getting it, where you'll get a list of these things. I was thinking about a pair of high heels, your own, somebody else's, a flashlight, a shirt that falls open in front or is missing a button or belonged to someone else or smells like smoke, a half-burned candle, your mom's old casserole dish, your mom's old Bible or Quran or Bhagavad Gita, your mom's old Danielle Steele novel, your mom's old sweater, her rings, the wasp hive, the bird's nest, the driftwood, the mottled rocks you've dragged back from everywhere. The warped cookie sheets that are spooning in your cupboard as we speak. The worst pair of boots you ever owned. 10 years ago, when both of my daughters were in college and I didn't have two nickels to rub together, I needed boots. And I had to buy a pair of men's $10 boots. They were enormous on my feet. They were horrible. They came in front of those massive cheap shoe places, which in my writing I referred to the store as cheap shitty boots. And in my head, that store is ever more going to be cheap shitty boots. But we've all had bad boots. The haircut that was a mistake. And who doesn't remember that? The window that sticks, the drawer, the door. And I think images, especially if you're stuck, I have been stuck a lot lately. I lost my husband last June and wasn't able to write for a while. And I'm still not able to write long pieces. So when I'm looking for the spark now, I don't force myself to do anything of length. I write a short poem or a paragraph. And maybe the next day I add a paragraph or start a new paragraph. But I think if you're stuck, if we're having trouble focusing on an image, channeling William Carlos Williams, no meaning but in things, because things are pretty ready at hand for us. So if we don't try to make too much of it, if we don't try to draw parallels, which will probably come later, I think if we feel inertia or paralyzed, I think the focus on the images is helpful. So on January 3rd, I started this project where I'm going to try to write a poem a day for 2024, a short poem. Tom Lynch, who, if you're a Michigan writer, you either know or know about, I'm sure, essayist and poet Tom Lynch said we should all write a poem a day, which is a pretty tall order. If I write a poem a day, that's probably what I'm going to write during the day. But anyways, on the 3rd of January, I wrote, "The crow's call came at 8 from somewhere in 1,000 limbs scoring the sky. The sky a graying flannel as we turn toward the sun. The monolith of daylight, harder than bone." It's images. It's not a great poem. Maybe someday it'll be a better poem. But I didn't push myself or expect anything else but gathering images. So I also have a prompt for all of you, if anybody's interested in writing on something very concrete that perhaps can expand. So the prompt is, and I wrote to it to make sure it was a writable prompt. And I think I wrote 2 paragraphs on it one day and went back the next day and wrote 2 more. But the prompt is, what one thing in your pantry or fridge would you not want people to know was there? How did you get it? And why did you keep it? So what I wrote, very briefly, or at least part of what I wrote, it's not that people would have judged me for smoking cigarettes on the front porch while Larry was dying. Almost anyone would cut you a break for that. Even the smuggest Puritan among us would have had to allow I bought those Marlboro lights at a harrowing time, a heartrending time, a time when the universe was fucking us so badly, biblically badly, smiting us for its own purpose, or more likely, no purpose at all. Larry was lost in a world of delusions. He was locked in the Detroit Pistons locker room. Would I come get him? Our house was full of strange children and dogs. Why were they here? Where would he sleep? He pulled gloves onto his feet, fretted over his shirt. How does this work? He asked. His limbs were as bruised as old fruit from falling. What's a little smoke amid all that brutality? Plus, a little smoke turned out to be just what I needed the evening after I'd smashed our dinner plates in the driveway. Take that, planet Earth. Take that, deity. Take that, whoever the hell is in charge around here. And then the next paragraph starts, the thing is, however, I kept that pack of cigarettes. They're still in my fridge. So that's the prompt. What one thing in your pantry or fridge would you not want people to know was there? How did it get there? And why, oh, why did you keep it? So I'm going to use the rest of my time giving all of you a chance to make some notes, or go open your pantry door and look probably behind the other stuff and see what you've stashed in there.
If you're willing to share your secrets, you could add them to the group chat.
Yes, but you don't have to share.
Jan, do you have more going on, or can I ask a couple of questions?
You go right ahead.
All right. You all gave us some incredible advice. Thank you so much. I have a question for you, which is, do you have some bad advice for us? What do you think is the worst advice you could give to someone who wanted to be better at creativity? You can go ahead and unmute yourselves, panelists, so we can hear you.
The worst advice is it's unwise to do what you're doing, which I have been given by very significant people in my life. I thankfully did not follow that. So that's the worst, is just don't do it. It's impractical, or whatever reason. So that was the worst advice I was given, to not try at all.
I was given a couple pieces of advice that aren't terrible, but also not helpful, I think. Very famously, Anne Lamott, who a lot of people look to for writing tips, talks about writing shitty first drafts, and how that's a solid plan, to write shitty first drafts. But it seems to me that when you're writing, it's an organic process and extensions grow out of it. So if you're writing shitty stuff, I don't know what beauty is going to come of that. Certainly, we are not going to sit down and write perfect first drafts. But I mean, I think we need to take the time and the thought, um, to try to make them specific and musical if we can, to make them, the best we can make in the limited time when we have. The other advice I've received was a time thing. And so many people have said, you have to write every day. You must write every day. And when I was teaching full time and raising kids, I wasn't writing every day. Um, and I never found that it was necessary to write every day. That advice sounds to me elitist almost. Good for you if you've got that kind of time. We don't all, and it's not a deal breaker if we can't find the time every day.
I don't think I've received terrible advice about it, but I think, speaking from personal experience, is it would be trying to channel more of a sense of play and not sort of coming at it too seriously. And I think especially for those of us who've had other careers and fields less creative, sometimes it can be sort of hard to give up habits of sort of corporate productivity. And sometimes just learning to rest and let go and approaching something playfully can be one of the hardest things to do. So I think that would be to my past self, that would be my advice.
I sort of joke with people. I mean, I mentioned, like, the limitations of demanding lives. But I sort of joke that my career is built on 10-minute increments. And I think that sort of harkens to what you're saying, Jan. Yeah, I would go months without being able to make, and my heart was breaking because that compulsion to make was so enormous. But I thoroughly believe in if you have the urgency and the need to do it, then you will do it however you can, and no one can dictate to you how that's going to happen. I also I have a long view. I always have a long view, to try to get out of, it's not just what happens in one day, it's what happens in a lifetime. So.
All right, I have another question. Do you have an inner critic, and what do you do with it?
Oh, that's a hard one. Do I have an inner? Of course, I have an inner critic. Thankfully, that inner critic is abating as I get more experience, and yeah. Now I think, now that I'm 52 years old, it's like I don't care what people think anymore so much. So the inner critic is still there, but it's almost more like in the how-tos, or I'm not even afraid of mistakes anymore. It's like I just feel like I can handle it. And I just think that comes with experience, and also I know I'm gonna be making my work no matter what anyone says now. If I never show another piece, it doesn't, then I just get to look at them and have them, and they're my research and, documents of my quest, like I said. So I rather keep them close. So I don't even care. I do care, obviously, but yeah, I just need to make. That's all I care about. So
I love that. I think my inner I try to send them on vacation to like a nice place for first draft, just because they're like a little uptight and a little rigid. So, that's the time to like give them a ticket and a suitcase and like ship them somewhere relaxing. But I totally pull them out for line edits. I actually love line editing. It's like my happy place. And in that case, like I think George Saunders who writes a beautiful Substack, by the way, abundant, generous Substack. But he talks about this like barometer, right? Of like, is this right? Is it not yet? And and I think in many ways it's that inner critic turning that dial, right? Of is this as crisp as I want it to be? Is it as specific? Is it as image driven as Jan said? So yeah, I think it's a double relationship. Sometimes I need them, sometimes I don't.
I agree with Karolina in that I love doing line edits too. And that's where my critic shows up. I guess she's kind. She pretty much leaves me alone when I'm when I'm doing the first draft. And she shows up when I'm editing, but she's helpful and she doesn't attack me ever. She focuses on the writing. And she's really helpful. How does this sound? Are there the right number of syllables there? What needs to happen here? Isn't this contradicting with a former image? But it's always friendly and always helpful. So she's not an antagonist.
Thank you. I have a couple more. Okay, you've just started something. It's a brand new idea. You're playing around with it. When do you know when it's good? When do you know, like, yes, this is going to work. I can roll with this. And when do you know, like, wasn't as great as I thought. Time to move on. Like, how do you tell if you should roll with it or not?
for me, I keep rolling until the annoying parts of a piece are gone. I've solved them. That's when I know something's finished, is when it's not bothering me anymore. So I just keep at it, keep tweaking, and until I'm not annoyed by something.
I try not to judge it too soon, but I think there is sometimes sort of a sense of it's almost energetic, right? Like, is it alive? Is it calling me? Like, does it sort of pop into my mind? Um, and sometimes it's calling me, but I don't know what to do. And in that case, I just tell myself not yet. Um, but I think with language, like so much, there are discoveries to be made, right? Until they're fewer and fewer. So I suppose I rarely feel. I mean, I think maybe the earlier the work, like I have a novel in the drawer, it's never seeing the light of day, Like, I just know. I think especially when we're starting out, I think we have to give ourselves the grace to sort of try things and make mistakes, and even later on too. Not everything has to be published. Maybe nothing has to be published, right? I think it also depends on one's aims. But in general, I guess I try to listen to that voice. Does it still have something to tell me?
Um, as I said, I have been working on short poems lately, and I guess often I know when a poem is done when if it lands right. I think it's really important for a poem to, especially a short poem, to land in some ironic way or some emphatic way that works with the earlier images that are introduced. So if that happens, I often know at least the first draft is done. Secondly, so this poem a day project that I'm writing these things at 6 and 7 in the morning before the sun comes up. I haven't done anything yet that day. I haven't encountered anything interesting. I'm just up sitting by the fireplace with my laptop. And so I knocked out about 8 of these about the weather and realized about that time, I can't keep writing about the weather for God's sake. I need to switch this up a little. So now I'm writing about maps. That started today. I wrote a poem about a map of the Cotswolds I had, which is a place where my husband and I went hiking. So I'm sure I'll follow the maps around my house for a little while, and then I'll think, okay, I can't keep writing about maps forever. And it'll be time to look around again and focus on something else.
Thank you. I have just one question and then we'll toss it out to the audience to see what kind of questions they have. But my last question is, why do you think it's worth pursuing a creative practice? I mean, you could just get on with your life. It would be a lot less work. Why do you do this to yourself? What is the point of all this?
I can do this one.
Perfect.
I think it would be a barren and empty existence to move forward without writing or whatever art form you have. Um, a lot of people have talked about how we are born to create, and that's probably on some level true of everybody. But I just can't even imagine the flatness of life without working in language, which is my medium. So, be interested to hear what others have to say about that.
I agree. Like, I feel so lucky to be able to do what I do, that a life aligned to allow a person to do this. For me, it's working with my hands and my mind and my whole body. So I just can't imagine living any other way. I feel like the richest person on the planet, you know, because of it. Um, it's it's allowed me to, um, like I said, ask deep questions. I sort of consider what I do like a visual philosophizing, physical philosophizing. So I don't know. Yeah, I it's almost like I don't have a choice. It's a deep compulsion, and maybe that's what's different from other people is, they don't have the drive. They have other compulsions, I hope, and thank God they do, because um, yeah, we need other people too, so to do their jobs and feel compelled to do surgery, or so this just happens to be what landed for me. So it's a deep, deep compulsion. Yeah.
Lynn said that very beautifully, and I completely agree. I think there is sort of a level of I have to. Um, but also I do think it's something that's I think of writing as being available to everyone, you know. I think it's a way to have a more honest relationship with yourself, whether you write fiction or nonfiction. Um, and to just kind of listen to yourself. I think it can be, you know, hard to do. The world is noisier and noisier. It seems every day. Um, so yeah, it's something that I want for everyone and something that I don't want for everyone because I do think it can be hard. Um, but I think if you're called to write and there's the smallest part of you that needs some kind of permission, here it is. Take it and run with it.
Thank you so much for those wonderful ideas. Um, we'd have just a tiny little bit of time left, but I would love to open it up to the audience. If any of you have any questions for our panelists. I see one over here in the chat. So often creativity does not seem to be valued in education and community. What can we do to help our communities value creative making and creative thinking?
Support the arts. I mean, we need more Bill and Sue Kelsos in the world. Um, yeah, yeah, support artists. And you know, I think it is such a shame that the arts are leaving schools. I mean, I taught art for 20 years. And I always told my students, like, you know, it's high school, so you know, you're just trying out all these things and figuring out how you work in the world, how you are in the world. But I think one thing the arts is it's just so much more open-ended, and it allows young people especially to settle into themselves and get to know themselves as they work with, you know, for me it's the hands, but you know, words and creativity. And then that feeds, even if they never pursue that, I think it feeds this sort of opens pathways of the mind and feeds the soul, or gives them permission to find creativity in all these other fields. So I think it is a really important practice that, you know, I think the arts is the vehicle for getting to know yourself in that way, even if you're not good at it. I don't know. What do you guys think?
I think it's how we talk about it too. I mean, I think there are audiences that may not, you know, may not think about the arts, but they value divergent thinking and innovation, you know. So I think often it's also what we call it for different audiences.
I think also becoming involved in community groups. Um, I live in mid-Michigan in the Lansing area, East Lansing, and we have lots and lots of writers groups, people who meet in cafes, groups who meet in each other's homes, um, lots of poetry readings that people can participate in, and certainly all kinds of people can attend. So I think sort of to take, first of all, to produce it and to talk about it with other people, but also to support by joining into these kinds of efforts in the community helps the arts thrive locally. And the older I get, the more important everything local is to me, because we have physical bodies and our world is where we are to a pretty large extent.
Jan just opened the most perfect opportunity for me to pitch this local writers group that the Good Hart Artist Residency has. If you don't know about it, we do meet twice a month, and all genres of writing are welcome. Any other questions from the audience? I did get one that was in that sign up form for this Zoom. I actually got it twice, so it's probably worth asking. And it is, how did you use all that creative time at Good Hart?
When I was at Good Hart, I did a lot of walking and a lot of writing, and I focused on poetry when I was there. So lots of poems written out of specific images I came across. Um, it had rained a lot, and for everyone who's been to Good Hart, you know, if you walk down the dirt road to the Odawa burial ground, um, you can imagine that there's kind of a thin mud because it's kind of a hard gravel, but um, this was early September. The leaves had come down and there was a thin mud over them and they formed like a pentimento, you know, painting emerging through another painting. That's an image that stays with me that I wrote about. But yeah, I wrote out of daily experience. I'm going to mute now because I've got some dog barking about to start happening here. But anyways, that's what I did.
What did I do? I sort of kept a pretty regular schedule. So I would make a lovely meal with oh my gosh, the food and all the veggies. I really enjoyed cooking for myself, just for myself. While I was there, I took lots of walks on the beach. I had so much fun with Cheryl True, who's here. We ATV'd, and she took me through her amazing woods. A lot of my work deals with the trees. So, oh my gosh, I still get super excited thinking about that time with her. Yeah, so I participated with the community quite a bit too. I treaded water with oh no, I'm forgetting her name. Uh, Joanna, right?
Joanne.
Joanne, yeah. I treaded water with Joanne and her group. So I did a lot of fun things with the community. But then I also just hunkered down in the studio and did a lot of drawing. I spent a rainy day just writing in my journal for like 8 hours of writing. So it really sort of tried to get up at a normal time and keep a schedule, but also really just take advantage of the environment and see, you know, rest and work and eat and socialize and just be there and see what came of it. So actually one of the pieces I showed you, the archway piece, was a piece I was working on while I was there prepping to work on. So yeah, that materialized.
This makes me nostalgic for Good Hart, though I was only there a couple of months ago. Um, I got unstuck on my novel, which was huge for me. I had arrived really stuck and sort of unclear how to move forward, yet knowing that something significant had to happen. So it just couldn't have arrived at a better time just to have that space and quiet to spread everything out. And I don't have space at home to do that. So that was huge. And watching those ginormous pileated woodpeckers outside the studio was phenomenal. And all the walks by the lake. This is a dangerous question.
The bottom line is, if you would really like to be creative, you should go visit a lake. Um, Well, we are a little bit over 8 o'clock, so I want to respect our panelists' time, and I think we'll end here. But panelists, thank you so much for your time. That was so inspirational, and I hope that everyone who was on this Zoom walks away with some really good ideas about how to get started. And just as a reminder, I will be sending this recording, in a day or two, and in that same email, I'm going to include that handout that Jan mentioned. So you can take a look for that. Thank you so much. Have a wonderful night.
Thanks.